Baseball is back, and the first pitch is on Netflix. The New York Yankees, led by 7-time All-Star Aaron Judge, head to the San Francisco Bay to take on Rafael Devers' San Francisco Giants. This season kicks off with one exclusive opening night game. Watch MLB Opening Night, the New York Yankees versus the San Francisco Giants, live on Netflix. Wednesday, March 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes 3-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling 4 things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, your team's home base. Collaborate within a shared PDF space. You've got your docs, your plans, your specs, and then invite the crew to build what's next. They talk up the teamwork. Use an updated render. They think that this design could be a contender. And when somebody wonders what's the next step, AI helps you finish the rest. Bolts are tight, now your plan's refined. Run a smoother business when you're all aligned. Do that with Acrobat. Learn more at adobe.com/do-that-with-Acrobat.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
Hi there, Duke fans. Episode 809 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. If your feed happens to have skipped over episode 808, which is where we recapped the ACC championship win over Virginia, don't listen to this. Go back and listen to that first, because there's just so much good stuff on there as we celebrated 3 ACC titles in 4 years. I'm Jason Evans. The guy who helped me celebrate that episode this morning is none other than Donald Wine. Donald, how you doing? It's been a solid, 12 or 13 hours since I last spoke to you.
And I didn't take a nap, so we're gonna try to go to bed early tonight. We'll see how that goes, but I'm excited about this bracket. It's a loaded one, but that's why we play the games.
It is quite loaded. Yeah, I'm not thrilled with the bracket that Duke got. I've done a little bit of a dive, and we're going to get into it. But before we get to that, we have another person on the podcast with us, our frequent guest, fill-in, whatever you want to call him. Scott Rich is here. Scott is joining us because Scott is a real bracketology expert. He dives into this stuff. He knows it really well. You've written articles for the DBR on this. Scott, how you doing this evening? It's 8:54. Have you fully dissected your bracket?
This might be the first time in years that I have not filled out a knee-jerk reaction bracket yet, probably because my mind is so dead from baby going to sleep. What do I do for the next hour and a half? Just zonk. So it might be a little bit before my full bracket is actually filled out due to dad brain.
Okay, so guys, let's get to it. And just so folks know, the way we're going to structure this is, first half of this podcast, we're going to talk exclusively about Duke's path, the East region, what we face there. We'll take a little break, and then we'll talk about some other brackets. We also want to talk about the Duke women who come in as a number 3 seed. The headline, of course, from all of this is that Duke is the overall number 1 seed, the top seeded team, the best team in all the land, and a reward for it is the toughest bracket. I think everyone agrees. The East is far and away the toughest bracket. It is the toughest, I would say, toughest or second toughest 16, the toughest number 8. It's ridiculous. It's unfair. We've got a 5 seed who probably should have been a 3 seed. I am viscerally angry that the committee has done this to Duke to reward us for being the top number 1 seed. It's outrageous. Which one of you, Donald, why don't you go first? Do you agree with me that this is just ridiculous that they gave Duke this bracket?
It's definitely a loaded bracket. As someone who, the first thing is that they're going to be here in DC if they meet the Sweet 16. So naturally they get to come back to my neck of the woods. I don't like who would join us there, right? UConn could be there. Kansas could be there. Michigan State could be there. we think back to 2019, and they always like to put Michigan State in our bracket. Just seems that way.
Always get Michigan State. It is ridiculous.
But I will say this, as I keep saying the word loaded bracket because it is. Let's be real. It's the NCAA tournament. It's always going to be a tough road to the Final Four. This is why John Shire scheduled all those games that he scheduled this year, because he probably had an inkling that even if he got the number one seed in the East, if there's a lot of decent teams or good teams out of the East, he's going to have issues with having an easy path. So let's just play the hard path. You also have St. John's in this bracket as a 5. St. John's as a 5 is a problem to me because they waxed UConn. UConn is a 2 in the same bracket. So both of them could end up in DC together. And I think the committee was, I think Scott Van Pelt said this, the NCAA tournament is a TV show. This is the biggest example of it being a TV show because there's a lot of big name brands in the East. Now, some of the teams might not be as good as their names would suggest based on their year performance, but it's still going to be a loaded thing. And the thing is, we could potentially have to play Kansas and Michigan State a second time. We all know it's difficult to beat teams twice in a season, but that's the path that we've been given.
Scott, go. What you got? And then I'm going to dive in and talk. I'm going to talk about Siena, Ohio State, and St. John's. I'll get to it in a second. Scott, give me your first take on the East. Go ahead.
So I spent a lot of time, and if you look at the Duke Basketball Report front page, I spent a lot of time today looking at the rules of how the committee puts together the top 4 seeds in each region specifically. So for anyone,
supposed to, I would say supposed to.
Yes. So I'll get to that. So the first thing I'll say is for anyone upset, hey, how did the Duke, the number 1 overall seed, get UConn, one of the top number 2 seeds, the second number 2 seed? That's because there is no S curve. 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 That is not something the committee takes into account. Houston was the top number 1 seed. They got location preference to the South region. Top number 2 seed. Thank you. Yeah. Houston went to the South. UConn was the next number 2 seed. They got their location. They went to the East. That is how the NCAA does that seed line by seed line on the 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then they go back and make adjustments for, did we break any rules in terms of conference teams potentially playing each other too soon? Did we break any rules in terms of overall balance of the bracket? So don't complain about having UConn as the number 2 seed. That worked as intended. The thing where Duke fans have an axe to grind is in the committee's own publicly accessible bracketeering principles, they say that they will relax their guidelines if the brackets are too dissimilar in terms of total overall seed. When you add up the true seed of the 1, 2, 3, 4, you add those all up, and they even showed this on the broadcast. If the difference between the hardest and the easiest bracket is more than 5, they will balance that to break that and to bring things back into balance. The sum of the top 4 seeds in Duke's bracket was 31. The sum of the top 4 seeds in the West bracket, Arizona's bracket, is 37. 37 minus 31 is 6. Yep. That is too big of a discrepancy by the NCAA committee's own rules to have in the bracketing process. Now, I will say, they were sort of hamstrung in how to get around this because they don't want to put teams in the same conference that are the top 4 teams from that conference. They don't want to put them in the same bracket. In order to get around that, in order to balance the bracket, they would have had to break that principle. Maybe they decided in the room that that principle overrode the balance of things. But if that is the case, then there's no excuse for also putting such a strong 5 seed in Duke's region. The St. John's was the number 2 5 seed on the true seed line behind I just had this pulled up, and of course my phone went away. So Vanderbilt was the top 5 seed. St. John was the second 5 seed. If you are going to make the number 1 overall seeds bracket harder than it should be by your own rules, then balance that the hell out with the seeds down the line. The fact that they didn't do that more than anything we'll talk about, that's what irks me the most.
All right, so let me dive into a couple of these teams that I think they screwed up. I'm going to start with Siena. And look, I'm not saying that Duke is in any great danger of losing to Siena, a 1 versus 16. But if you look at where Siena is in Ken Pomeroy in the predictive metrics, because we've heard many times the committee's own chair said they use the performance metrics, things like wins above bubble, strength of record, those kind of things. That's what they use to determine which teams make the field. But when it comes to seeding those teams, they like to use the predictive metrics, Ken Pomeroy being the most respected of those predictive metrics. Siena in Ken Pom is the second best of the 16 seeds. And I want to point out, by the way, there aren't 4 16s, there are 6 16 seeds. Why would you give Duke, the overall number 1, the second best of all the 16s? In fact, there are 15 seeds that are like Furman and Tennessee State, basically the same as Siena. I don't understand why Lehigh and Prairie View, who are far and away, they are an order of magnitude worse than every other team in this field. The two of them are playing each other, and then the winner of that gets Florida, the worst of the number 1. Why is Florida rewarded with 2 teams that are in like the 280s in Ken Pom, while Duke gets a team that's in the 190s? Again, I'm not saying Siena's going to beat Duke, but right off the bat, they gave Duke a tougher 16. Let's get to Ohio State as number 8. This is Ohio State and Ken Pom is number 26. The other number 8s are 32 Georgia, 33 Villanova, and 36 Clemson. We got the toughest number 8 guys by several spots.
Ohio State, this is an Ohio State team that just brought Michigan down to the wire. And those other number 8s, Georgia, got upset. Those other 8 seeds looked bad in their conference tournament. Ohio State looked quite good.
Georgia got upset. Villanova is injured. Clemson's also injured. We just, we showed Clemson what it's ridiculous that Ohio State's on the same line with Georgia, Villanova, and Clemson. TCU is the worst of the 9. So, do we get a break there? Not really, because I think Ohio State's going to take out TCU. That's nothing. I'm going to get to St. John's for a second. St. John's is a 5 seed, is criminal. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. They just depantsed UConn. I mean, what they did, they beat UConn by 20 points in the final of the Big East. St. John's record over their past 20 games, they're 19-1. 19-1 over their past 20 games. I sorted on Bart Torvik. Torvik is another one of the predictive metrics. Over their past 20 games, since January 5th, St. John's is the number 10 team in the land. 10th best team in the land over the past 2.5 months. And you're making them a 5 seed in our region? This is ridiculous. It's absurd. It is unfair. It is not a reward to Duke. It is a penalty to Duke.
And I'll be clear. Take off the Duke color glasses for a second. It's criminal for St. John's, right? St. John's was the number 1 team in the Big East. They won the Big East regular season. As you mentioned, they destroyed UConn in the Big East tournament final, and their reward is they're a 5 in a bracket where UConn is the 2 and has what you would think to be an easier path to the Final Four if you're a Big East fan. So I'm sitting here looking at that, and I'm sure St. John's is like, well, we should have even won the thing if this is the reward we're gonna get. Same with Duke, right? Like, why be the number 1 seed overall if you're gonna get some of these hard teams? And again, the Big East champion, who is the 5th Power 5 school or a Power 5 conference. I don't understand that part of it, especially the Big East part of it.
Well, especially because in Pomeroy, St. John's is better than UConn. I mean, UConn's the number 11 team. I don't mind the other side of Duke's bracket. I was looking at it. I'm like, first of all, even though UConn was the second of all the number 2 seeds, I'm like, honestly, I think UConn deserved to be a number 3. I don't think that much of this UConn team. They are not the UConn teams we've seen in the past couple of years. The rest of the bottom half of the bracket, Michigan State's good, but I mean, as a 3, I'm not terrified of them. I actually think UCLA and Louisville, who are 7 and the 6, I might pick one of those teams to come out of the bottom half. That bottom half of the bracket, I think, is not that. Duke's half of the bracket is really tough. The bottom half of the bracket, I'm like, whoever comes out of Duke's half, that team's making the Final Four. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that Duke's hardest game is most likely to be in the Sweet 16 than it is in the Elite Eight. I've watched a lot of UConn basketball living in
By the way,
stores.
sorry, really quick, we haven't said it yet, but the 4 seed is Kansas, who is obviously a
Yeah, I
very
mentioned
interesting
Kansas, and
yeah,
because again, it could be a rematch, but this could be one with Darren Peterson this time.
yeah, exactly. That's the rub. Kansas with or without Darren Peterson.
But so I will say, with the risk of just putting my tenure in question, UConn is not playing like a number 2 seed right now at all. This is a UConn team that is coasting off of a very, very strong non-conference schedule. But not only have they lost team to bad teams in the Big East, they've been scraping by against bad Big East teams for weeks and weeks and weeks and getting by under the radar because they're squeezing out wins. This is a team that doesn't have a great matchup for Cam Boozer. Alex Caravan is not someone who's going to bang into post with Cam Boozer. This is a team that relies on three-point shooting with a bunch of good but not great three-point shooters to get offense. If it ends up 1v2, if it ends up with Duke at UConn in the Elite Eight, will take that matchup, especially compared to any other of the 2 seeds. And I think even of the 3 seeds, yes, Michigan State is the top 3 seed online, but we've played them. They also have their own injury. Divine Ufachuku, who is coming up, who had basically started for them at the 2 guard, is hurt and out for the year. They're now a more shallow team. They're a team that Jeremy Fears could also get kicked out of the game at any point in time if he decides to kick someone in a place that he's not supposed to be kicked. So
he's only done it 3 or 4 times. Maybe he can avoid it.
I'm going to say it. Jeremy Fears is who everyone thought Grayson Allen was.
Yeah.
Jeremy Fears actually is him. We'll talk about that if and when that matchup comes. But as hard as the top end of our bracket is, the bottom half of our bracket, if we're able to get through that initial gauntlet, could, that's a big could, but could give us some relief. Not that justifies anything that went on in here.
For me, I look at this TCU team, and a lot of people are counting them out because of Ohio State and what they did in the Big Ten tournament. But TCU beat Florida. They took Michigan to the brink. I believe they beat Kansas. Like, this team has some good wins on there. I believe they beat Texas Tech as well, just a few weeks ago. So they have some really good wins. And even their losses are, again, Michigan, they just took to the wire. And so I look at this team and go, that 8-9 matchup is tough no matter who we get. And also, I know we'll talk about this a little bit more with Siena, but Siena has a familiar name as a head coach, and that's Syracuse legend Jerry McNamara. Why is that important? This could be the start of seeing Jerry McNamara every year because he is the front runner for the Syracuse job now that Red Autry has been fired. So it'll be an interesting time for Jerry to kind of show that he can compete against an ACC team and besides that, the number 1 team in the country in Duke. But Duke has his work cut out for him. If I'm John Shire, yeah, sure, inside I might be seething, might have used it to get a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, but as they say, this is what we signed up for. We signed up for the hard games, and that's why you come to Duke, is to play these hard games. So let's get ready.
Yeah, no disagreement there. And for all my outrage, for all my upset at this, and I really don't like the slate of the potential rematches. I think Duke is tough to prepare for. I think Cameron Boozer especially is very tough to prepare for. A team like Kansas, a team like Louisville, a team like Michigan State, these clubs that have played Duke already this year, it gives them a little tiny bit of an advantage in terms of, sort of knowing what worked and what didn't work the last time they played, even though a lot of those games are a long, at least a couple months ago. But bottom line, I'm not saying I think that Duke's not going to come out of this, out of these regions. I'm just a little upset that I feel like the path is tougher than it needed to be. Scott, last word on Duke's region.
I have to imagine that there's going to be a lot of talk about this moving forward. What ended up happening was that there were more good teams in the east part of the United States, and that ended up screwing Duke over because they were the number 1 in the East. At some point in time, the NCAA is going to have to wake up to the modern world and say, everyone can get on planes now We can afford to put teams on planes. Maybe that shouldn't be the number one principle in creating brackets anymore. Because if we keep doing that, the teams are just getting punished by where they are in the United States. If we have a Big Ten and an ACC that go from coast to coast, maybe East, West, Midwest, and South is a little bit antiquated for the bracket each year.
Hey, that's a great point. Can we get you on the seating committee? That'd be awful nice. By the way, it's worth noting, no ACC official, AD, whatever else it may be, no one from the ACC was. Yeah, Bubba, right. No one from the ACC was in the seating discussions. No one from the Big 12 either, which is very interesting. There were a bunch of smaller conferences that have now sort of, rotated into a lot of those seating spots. And, I don't know, did it make a difference? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Jason, it did. You know why? Because the SEC got 10 teams, the Big 10 got 9 teams, and both the Big 12 and the ACC, who had nobody in the room, only got 8 teams.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I mean, who on the ACC? Do you feel like there was a 9th team that deserved to be in?
There was definitely not a 10th team in the SEC that deserved it. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, and thank God Auburn didn't. All the talk that Auburn was going to, and look, hey, Auburn, I admire you for playing that schedule. You got to win games.
It was disappointing that Bruce Pearl wasn't a little bit sadder on the broadcast. I'm not going to lie. I was hoping to watch him implode in real time as it became more and more clear that wasn't going to happen. Props to him. He kept his composure and did his job as a journalist, I think, for the first time in his short career as an analyst at CBS.
Yeah. I mean, I think he knew there wasn't really much of a leg to stand on. So, all right, with that, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side, look at some of the other brackets, and we'll be talking about the Duke women as they also seek a Final Four. All that in just a moment.
DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook for live betting, is built for March. The tournament is unexpected. Rewards are guaranteed. DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering the most generous rewards on the market.
Yeah, with DraftKings, the #1 sportsbook for live betting, you're not betting on what might happen. You're betting on what's happening right now. Are you new to DraftKings? Bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code DukeBB. That's code DukeBB to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets instantly. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Did you know only 6% of people are getting enough fiber? That's why Quaker created Fiber February, a month-long movement to show your gut a little more love. It's like dry January, only easier and more delicious. Quaker has over 100 delicious options that are a good source of fiber. So go buy Quaker Oats today and join the Fiber February movement for a healthy gut.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The Lincoln Spring Sales event is on now, and there's never been a better time to experience the feeling of driving a Lincoln. Pictures, sunlight through the available panoramic vista roof, music, weather, and maps on the 48-inch panoramic display, and a drive so smooth that inspiration rides up front. Stepping out better than you got in. That's the Lincoln feeling. Get behind the wheel of the 2026 Lincoln Nautilus SUV and discover exceptional offers only at your local Lincoln retailer.
All right, ladies. When you've done the work, you want your hydration to do the same. Introducing new Gatorade Lower Sugar, now with no artificial flavors, sweeteners, or colors. And 75% less sugar and all the electrolytes of regular Gatorade, now available nationwide.
Back from the break on the Duke Basketball Roundup. Jason, Donald, Scott with you as we're breaking down the brackets. Initial thoughts. You know, this is not our final write it in stone kind of thing. Don't have a pen and paper out there. Ooh, they said we should pick this guy. I'm not sure that we're at that point yet.
Are we even that good for people to be taking that advice?
We are not. I'm just going to go ahead and say
this is not the advice you want to take for your brackets at all.
Yeah, exactly. But Donald, first off, I want you to give us, there are a lot of Duke adjacent, former Dukies, however you want to call it, folks who are going to be in this pool. If you are merely someone who loves the Blue Devils to death and you're like, I want to root for anything that is good connected to Duke, Donald has the list for you of people to root for. Give it to me, Donald.
Yeah, so let's start with Penn, because TJ Power today, if you did not see his game today, he had 44 points and 14 rebounds as Penn booked their ticket to the NCAA tournament. They are 14 in the South, so you can cheer for TJ Power if you were one of those people who need to pick an upset. Maybe look at Penn. Maybe see if TJ Power can go off a little bit. You have
actually really quick. My wife and my son both went to Penn, and when I told her, I was like, Penn made the field. She was, very excited. Oh yeah, she always loves to pick the Ivy team to upset, and obviously if it's her team, she's even more excited. I'm like, yeah, they made it because they have a former Duke guy who scored 40 plus points today for them to beat Yale. And she's like, there's a guy who played at Duke who's now playing at Penn. She's like, he must be incredible. And then she pauses. She's like, he must have been terrible at Duke.
we love TJ, and we're glad to see him doing very, very well. Another player that's going to be playing, Mark Mitchell, obviously plays for Missouri. They will be a 10 seed in the West. Unfortunately, I can't root for him in their first round matchup because they're playing Miami in that first round matchup. So very sorry, Mark. Love you, but I'm going to have to pick against you in that one. Now let's get to some of the coaches.
Hey, by the way, Donald, really quick. Sorry, I'm jumping in on every one of these, but you're making me think of things. Jay Lucas and Mark Mitchell certainly know each other.
Right. Exactly.
Interesting matchup there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of doing the segue to coaches by having Jay Lucas, obviously coach of Miami.
My bad. I interrupted you. I apologize.
Yeah. So let's get to the other coaches. Tennessee State, of course, we've talked about Nolan Smith in his first season at Tennessee State. They are a 15 seed in the Midwest region. So again, lengthy odds for them, but we're rooting for the people's champ. Now, if you want to have somebody help out Duke, that somebody could be Johnny Dawkins and UCF, because they are a 10 seed in the East. If they can maybe throw some sugar in the old engine there and get all those 2 and 3 seeds out of the way, maybe we can see Johnny Dawkins right here in DC in the Sweet 16. But again, a long shot when you're going up against UConn. And then finally, shout out to friend of the pod, obviously, Kenny Blakeney and Howard. They are going to be in the play-in game. They're a 16 seed in the Midwest. They will be taking on UMBC on Tuesday night. The winner takes on Michigan. So that's going to be a big-time matchup. But again, Howard, I think this is their third straight year in the dance, and really, really happy for all these guys as they punch their ticket in for their players as well.
Yeah, it's pretty great. All right, guys, let's start. Let's go to the West bracket. That's what I was looking at. I couldn't find. I was looking at teams, and I couldn't find which bracket it was. I was looking at. Let's go to the West bracket. Let's start over there, and I just want to hear sort of, what do you think is a interesting team to pay attention to? Maybe a dark horse or something. Arizona is obviously the number one out there. Donald, you mentioned Miami and Missouri playing in the first round. Purdue's the number 2. I'm a little surprised. Purdue, congrats to Purdue for their, really nice showing in the Big Ten tournament. Great showing in the Big Ten tournament. Little surprised that Purdue's a number 2, but Scott, go first. Tell me what you're looking at in the West, and what do you think is the most interesting, team to pay attention to out there?
I think that this is a bracket where you could see a surprise team make it because the 2 and the 3 seed are weak. I agree. I watched Purdue beat my Michigan Wolverines. That was just because Braden Smith decided to play like the National Player of the Year for the first time in months. He was incredible incredible. I'm not sure, but it's going to take him playing like the best player in the country for them to make a run. Gonzaga is the 3 seed. We don't know whether Braden Huff is going to be healthy or not. I don't think they're a 3 seed if he's not playing. That's a potential sort of weak top seed there. Arkansas is a team that looked really, really good in the SEC championship today. Darius Acuff is playing like a guy who's a top 10 pick. He's playing like a guy who's one of the best players in the country. And they have the complement.
top 10 pick?
Yeah.
Darius Acuff looked like a top 5 pick today.
They look like a better team than when we played them back in on Thanksgiving. There's some teams that you see sort of plateau. This team has gotten better and better. Their complementary players have been great. Trevon Brazil just sort of does something that just jumps off the screen every time you watch that team. That's a team that I think if they could give Arizona some trouble and could potentially make it to the Final Four.
Donald, what's your take on the West?
It's interesting. The play-in game between Texas and NC State, the winner of that game plays BYU. I think that's fascinating no matter who comes out of that 11 matchup. I think that's a fascinating one. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be an upset, but BYU was probably not happy at the fact that they got one of Texas or NC State, because both of them have the players if they put it together. Like we've seen NC State try to put it all together. It would be great to see that matchup. And also, I think 5v4, Wisconsin and Arkansas, if that is a second round matchup, it's going to be a question of if Acuff can continue to go off or if Wisconsin's going to hit 97 threes like they did a couple times against Michigan and some other teams. So I think that'll be an interesting second round matchup if it comes to pass.
Yeah, the thing I was going to highlight in the West, the thing that I think is most interesting is Arkansas and Wisconsin. First of all, potentially a great matchup between the two of those teams, but if either of those teams, they are already hot. If they stay hot, they can bomb you out of the gym. I don't care how good you play defense. Darius Acuff is able to do things that you just cannot defend. And that Wisconsin club, like you said, sometimes they just go nuclear. They're just like, oh, this is a game we're going to hit 18 threes in this game. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh, well, thanks for showing up. So I think that's really interesting. And I don't know if I'm going to predict those teams to beat Arizona, but I think they definitely have a chance because Arizona is truly unique among all the teams in the field in that they hate to shoot 3-pointers. Arizona shoots. They're like one of the 10 fewest 3-pointers of any teams in the country or something like that. If you have a team that's bombing away and hitting threes, Arizona could suddenly have a difficult time keeping up. And I think that's sort of, obviously Arizona has won a hell of a lot of games this year against teams that shoot a lot of threes. So it's not very easy to do that. And Arizona's got great defenders that prevent you from doing that. But team gets hot, Arizona could really struggle to keep up with them. All right, let's move on from the West down to the region that Duke is, paired with, so to speak, in the Final Four, which is the South, headlined by the number 1 seed Florida. North Carolina's in there as a number 6. Houston's the number 2. I think this is a pretty tough region. Scott, why don't you go first on it? What do you see in the South that's worth highlighting?
So I will say by the numbers, by the NCAA seed line, this was the second toughest region after Duke's region. Take that for what it's worth. They gave the worst number 1 seed and the best number 1 seed similar regions. I think this is one of the few places where you may see a 6-11 upset. And no, I'm not just saying that because it's North Carolina and we're rooting against them. I think this is, you look at the 5-12 and the 6-11 matchups, those places where we normally see the big upsets. The 5 and the 6 seeds just feel so much stronger this year than they have in the past because of this sort of, top-down nature of the game. It's going to be a lot harder to get an upset of that magnitude. One that we might see is VCU over UNC, given we know the Caleb Wilson situation. And VCU, again, there's a big difference between a mid-major VCU team that plays in the A10 that's competing rather than some of those teams you normally get on the 11 and 12 line. I don't think UNC was happy with their draw at all when they saw VCU on the other side.
Donald, where are you on the South?
I think the interesting part of this is it was unavoidable by the committee, but Florida, I'm sure, is sitting there like, we may have to play likely Houston, but they could also play Texas A&M in Houston to try and get to the Final Four. And we've done that. We've been there before, right? We had that game in Houston a few years back against Baylor to get to a Final Four. You don't want. I'm sure Florida, as good as they're playing, does not want to see Houston basically 2 miles from home. That's just not something they want to do. And I'm sure that was again unavoidable. But even A&M, that second round matchup, if it's A&M versus Houston for the right to go to Houston and play in the Sweet 16. That is going to be a dogfight because both of them would love to play close to home like that.
So the team I'm going to highlight out here is Vanderbilt. If you're Florida, you're like, Vandy's my number 5. What happened here? How did this happen? Ken Palm has Vandy as the number 12 team in the land. How are they a number 5? To me, Vandy and St. John's are two teams. I'm like, how do those teams on the 5 line? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. And for Florida, the top team in the SEC, to get Vandy as their 5 seed, like, aren't we supposed to protect you from rematches and stuff like that?
Didn't just pants them in the just pants them.
I mean, didn't Vandy just beat Florida like a couple days ago or something? So to me, I think that's a really, really interesting potential matchup. I thought Vandy looked really good, even though they lost to Arkansas today. Like, their offense was clicking. It was that Arkansas just couldn't be stopped. But I think Vandy's a tough team, and I think that's a really interesting one. And then the other one is, like you said, Donald, Houston in Houston, and this Houston club, they played this Arizona team really, really tight. Houston looks, this just in, Kelvin Sampson's team is playing well in March.
Never seen it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I agree that the South is the second toughest region. I think Florida got no favors, but on the other hand, they're the weakest of the 4 number 1s. So they didn't deserve to get any favors. But that's a really tough bracket for me to pick. Let's go to the Midwest. You guys are both Michigan fans. Give me really quick, Donald. You can go first on. Do you like Michigan's path? I think Michigan's path is pretty nice.
It is nice, and again, they took a stumble today in the Big 12 championship, but I think, drawing St. Louis is a decent team, but Georgia really was faltering down the stretch. Texas Tech is obviously without JT Toppin. They're a team that's much different without him, but they're still a decent team. I think also, Jason, one of the things I was looking at with regards to this bracket is Miami of Ohio. I know everyone's been talking about Miami of Ohio and whether they should have made it as a at-large. The answer is yes. I think SMU did dirty in a way because Miami of Ohio is just 2 hours from Dayton, which is where they play in the first 4 this week. So SMU is basically playing a road game against the team that everybody's been talking about because they've only lost 1 game. SMU is going to have to.
It don't matter. SMU is beating Miami of Ohio is not good. I'm just going to say it. Miami of Ohio, they're not good. They didn't belong in the field. I'm just saying, I don't think they belonged in the field.
Jason, this is the NCAA tournament. Magic happens in March. And Miami of Ohio, how many times have we seen teams? We just talked about the fact that Houston could play at Houston and how dangerous that can be. I do not count out any team that plays close to home. Miami of Ohio gets that chance.
So I will say, from a Michigan perspective, from the number 1 seed here, you have to think it's going to be hard to prepare for Michigan on potentially a 2-day turnaround when you're playing that 3 big offense that they have that's just so unique in the college game today. I do think, though, that Michigan was not happy when they saw St. Louis is their 9 seed. We've been talking in our sort of, our text chain back and forth about how dangerous St. Louis is as a team going back a few weeks now. They sort of stumbled down the end of the regular season. They stumbled in their conference tournament, but they're a team that shoots a bunch of threes and plays solid and doesn't turn the ball over. Those are the things that make an upset. And oh, by the way, the thing that Michigan has struggled with in most of their losses this year has been bigs that can take shots out on the perimeter and drag someone like Ademara out. Robbie Avila is the textbook case of someone who can do that. If St. Louis gets past Georgia, who I think, again, we're talking about the strength of the 8 seeds. Georgia's a much weaker 8 seed than, for instance, Ohio State. St. Louis gets past that. That's again, I'm saying this as a Michigan fan. That's the most dangerous 1-8, 1-9 upset, I think, is St. Louis versus Michigan. That said, the rest of the bracket, not all that scary. You look at a weak Texas Tech team, that's maybe the 5-12 upset because of all those injuries. And again, the bottom of the bracket, we've seen Virginia, we've seen how strong they are. We've seen Iowa State look great in the Big 12, but those are both teams I'm not sure how they would match up against the overwhelming size of Michigan, especially on a short turnaround in the Elite Eight.
And I think the one thing about Michigan that is not necessarily cause for concern, but we saw some of those deficiencies today against Purdue, and even throughout the Big Ten tournament, is without Edgley Cason, they kind of had all their roles kind of put out of sorts. You see Yaxel Landeborg taking more threes. And if you remember against Michigan, when we played Michigan, he hit a couple of them, but he was traditionally like a 28, 29% three-point shooter during the season. He's elevated that in the past week or so. But if that goes away, they really relied on him to make a lot of tough threes today. And he made some of them, but when he stopped making them, that's when Purdue made their run and was able to withstand the onslaught coming in. So Michigan's shooting is going to be a question. It's not necessarily their inside game, is if they can hit outside threes. If teams going to let them shoot outside threes and they start missing them or go cold, that's when a team like St. Louis can get them.
And I'll just say, I wasn't with you guys to bask in the glow of our ACC championship earlier this morning, but if you want case in point of how amazing of a coaching job John Shire did, look at the challenges Michigan has faced over the last 2 weeks without LJ Cason, without their backup point guard who played 15, trending upwards of 20-ish minutes a game. It really has thrown the roles and the rotation of Michigan off. You've seen Elliot Cadeau sort of struggling, taking a lot of shots that he's normally not taking because they sort of put LJ Cason in when they need a more offensive scoring-minded point guard. Everything about Michigan that was a well-oiled machine a month ago, there's been a engine work for LJ Cason going out. So the mere fact that Duke was able to do what they did with 2 starters gone, let alone, a backup point guard, just John Shire, did they vote for Coach of the Year before the conference tournaments or not? Because if they waited to vote for him and he doesn't win it, then it's even more of a crime.
Different people, different organizations vote at different times, but John Shire's winning Coach of the Year at this. I just, it's unfathomable to me that you could pick someone else, but you never know. Hey, my take on that region is, I know Michigan fans like you guys are looking at St. Louis and quaking in your boots to some extent. There was a point in this season, St. Louis was like 25-1 at one point, and I was like, this is a top 20 club. This is a team that I'm picking to the Sweet 16. I was like, St. Louis looked great. They've really struggled the past few weeks. They're capable of playing with anybody in the country, but the past couple of weeks, they have not looked very good. So I'm not even so sure that they're getting past Georgia. And if they do, I really think the Michigan size is going to be a problem for them. I agree with you guys. Texas Tech, I know you can't penalize the team for the injuries. Look, we are Duke. We don't want to be penalized for guys missing for injuries. And I love that Texas Tech kept on gutting it out and winning games and, doing as best they could without JT Toppin. But I'm sorry, they're not as good as they were when they had JT Toppin. They were already a small team. When they lose their best big man, they're not as good a team. The fact that they're a 5 seed, you had to put them there, I guess, based on all the metrics and everything, but they're not much of a threat as a 5 seed.
And it's interesting that Texas Tech really didn't get punished for JT Toppin being out when Keith Gill, the head of the selection committee, basically said on national TV that UNC was penalized for Caleb Wilson being out for the rest of the year due to his injury. So it's interesting. Again, it's just what's the word? Inconsistent application of some of these themes that they have going on here.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing that I find interesting about the bottom of Michigan's bracket is that I think that Iowa State and Virginia are 2 of the best, maybe the 2 best of the threes. Those are 2 threes. The number 2 and the number 3 seeds. I think both those. Frankly, Iowa State. I think Houston's the best of the 2s. I think Iowa State's the second best of the 2s. That is a really, really good Iowa State team. I do agree they may have some trouble with Michigan's size should they face them. And then Virginia, frankly, the way Virginia has played since early January, Virginia hasn't lost to anyone not named Duke. They've been mowing teams down. That's a really good Virginia club, as we saw in the ACC title game. I'm thrilled that they were rewarded with a number 3 seed. I think they absolutely deserve that. And I just, I look at the rest of the bottom of that bracket. I'm like, there's no way Kentucky or Tennessee or, these other teams are not. Virginia and Iowa State are making the Sweet 16, and the winner of that game, I think, is going to give Michigan a real handful. It's a very interesting contest. Are we going to do Final Four? Should we do Final Four picks or not? What do you think, Scott? No, yes, no.
Shoot from the hip. Final Four picks.
Sure, why not? All right, you said it. You do it first.
Okay. And again, as I mentioned, I have not done my normal bracket analysis like I have for the first, 35 non-child addled years of my lives. I'm going Duke from the East. I'm sticking with my gut and going to say Arkansas from the West. I'm going to say Michigan from the Midwest because otherwise the man who paid for my ticket to go see the Michigan Duke game might disown me. And then I can't not pick Houston given their route. Especially going home. So I'm going Duke, Arkansas, Michigan, Houston.
Donald?
I'll make it simple. I have the exact same thing as Scott. Done. I really did. I mean, those make the most sense. Also, I have ties to all four of those schools. So there you go.
So I like Duke and Arizona. I do like Arkansas a lot, but I think this Arizona team has they're really, really good team. I got Duke and Arizona, and then in the bottom, I'm going to take Iowa State. I just, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe you guys are both Michigan fans, but I really like this Iowa State team. I think they find a way to win really well. And then, Houston. It's super hard to pick against Houston on what is, if not their home floor, it's kind of sort of a little bit their home floor. They'll be sleeping in their own beds, and that kind of stuff does matter. So that's what I got. Last word, Scott.
I will say, I'm not sure how much you guys talked about this, but the Iowa State Arizona game this weekend, what a freaking basketball game. What an end to a basketball game. I am very glad that we did not get Iowa State in our bracket because I don't want Milan Momcilovic anywhere near the court when we're playing against them because that guy can shoot. He is automatic regardless of how covered he is. That's not someone you want to see. So if we're complaining about our bracket for the next 24 hours, I'm holding on. I'm very happy that guy is literally on the opposite corner of the bracket from us.
Well, and Joshua Jefferson might be the second best player in the country. I mean,
he is according to the Ken Pom rankings. So
yeah, he does not get any pub. He doesn't get, there are all these other guys out there who get all the publicity and stuff. He might be the second best player in the country. I agree with you. That Iowa State team is really good. That's why I have picked them. All right. Before we go, Donald Wine. While I was having dinner, Donald Wine was watching the women's draw. Mm-hmm. Give me what you got, man. Where's Duke, and do you like their draw?
Yeah, so first off, Duke drew a 3 seed in the Sacramento 2 region, and the way they do it is they have 2 regions, and they have 2 locations for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. This year it's Sacramento and Fort Worth, and they split the 4 regions amongst those 2 sites. I would love for them to get back to having 4 sites, but that's a conversation for another day. But Duke is a 3 seed in the Sacramento 2 region. They will open up against Charleston, the 14th seed, on Friday in Cameron, right? So they are hosting a pod in Cameron on Friday and then Sunday. The thing about this, Jason, their 1 seed in that bracket is UCLA. There's UCLA and UConn. Those are the 2 best teams in America. And then there's really a sizable gap between them and maybe the rest of the field. We thankfully wouldn't have to see them until a regional final, but I will say that we have a chip on our shoulder because winning the ACC, being on the run that we did, there's a lot of people who thought we should slide into the 2 line. We ended up on the 3. Our 2 in our bracket is LSU. So it would be a rematch of the game that we had in Cameron back in early December, where we started out with a double-digit lead, and then LSU came back and really beat the doors off us going away. I think this is an interesting bracket for Duke. If they can get the mindset of having the chip on their shoulder and saying we feel a little bit slighted, and the ACC should feel slighted. They're the 3 seed line of Louisville and Duke. Those are the highest seeds that an ACC team got, and those teams were in the top 10 for a lot of the year. I think that this is a team that is going to come out and hopefully play with that kind of abandon, get another chance at LSU in the Sweet 16. would be great, because I'm not betting against Kara Lawson and that bunch a second time against LSU, even though they are a really good squad. But it's still an uphill battle. I mean, like I said, UCLA is one of the best teams in the country. It's going to take a really big effort to beat them in California to get to the Final Four, which is in Phoenix, where you would have the right to face Texas, who gets to play at home. Essentially, they're playing in the Fort Worth region. So I'm excited about this. It is a difficult bracket for Duke, but I think it's one that if they get past LSU, they can get back to the Elite Eight with that chance to go one step further than they did last year. Last year, it was South Carolina that they fought tooth and nail and came up just short. This year, they want to get one step past that to a Final Four. They'll likely have to get past UCLA.
I was just going to say, women's bracket generally, there was an interesting subplot over the last week of who would be the number one overall seed between UConn and UCLA. UConn is undefeated, but the Big East is not a good women's basketball conference. UConn wins every game in the Big East by 50. UCLA has one loss to Texas, again, another number one overall seed, but the Big Ten is fantastic in basketball this year. They had something like, 10 more Q1 wins than UConn did. A little interesting that they went with the shiny undefeated record, and let's be honest, the name brand of UConn, is the number one overall seed against the team that by pretty much every metric, and how as the women's game continues to sort of equilibrate, as teams start catching up to those top group, how is the women's game going to adjust how it builds its bracket? Is that going to start looking more and more like the men's, where, hey, UConn has to schedule a little bit different, where they sort of get the Gonzaga treatment or something like that? Interesting subplot as the women's basketball, NCAA women's basketball continues to grow like it has been over the last few years.
I like it. Good stuff, guys. All right, we are going to wrap it up here. We've been on for almost an hour with our initial, off the cuff picks of what's going to happen in the NCAA tournament. The headline, of course, is all three of us think that Duke got screwed. I think we think this every year.
But let's roll out the ball and play.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any team that doesn't think they got screwed? Isn't that just part of the ritual?
It is always. Everybody thinks they got the short end of the stick. The committee can do no right as far as we are all concerned. Look, he is Scott. He is Donald. I am Jason. Your Blue Devils are on their way to Greenville, South Carolina to play Siena. We're going to have a preview of that coming up. The feed is going to be busy, folks. We're going to be talking to Jordan Brenner, the expert about giant killers and underdogs and who you should pick in your bracket. We're going to have him on the podcast in the next couple days. Until then, here's the Duke Band playing us out and taking us to the tournament.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hey, Sal.
Hank, what's going on? We haven't worked a case in years.
I just bought my car at Carvana, and it was so easy. Too easy.
Think something's up?
You tell me. They got thousands of options. Found a great car at a great price. And it got delivered the next day.
It sounds like Carvana just makes it easy to buy your car, Hank.
Yeah, you're right. Case closed.
Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.